Chronicles of Vaxxand, Part 3, Chapter 11, Vaxxand. After a few hours of back and forth questions, the group decided to make their way back to the village where Cass could get a good meal and a bed to sleep on. As they walked, Cass found out that the pair were elves and they were travelling adventurers. What shocked Cass most was how familiar it all seemed. He had been an avid reader of fantasy novels when he wasn't gaming, and now he felt like he had woken up in one. As scared as he was of his situation, a small part of him began to simmer with excitement. They touched briefly on Cass's home, but the main topic of conversation was Vaxxand itself. Caleb spoke of small skirmishes that were now frequent. Mistrust had been brewing for a while between the races, all beginning with the closing of the human borders of Malagos. "Why did the humans decide to close their borders?" asked Cass. "No one knows exactly why, but since then the small reports that are brought out of Malagos are quite concerning," replied Caleb. "Malagos and the humans are ruled over by a powerful wizard named Caelor Fenris. He'd been in power for centuries peacefully, but now the reports say he experiments on his subjects, turning them into vile creatures for his own amusement," said Caleb, who began to walk slightly ahead, his head bowed. Whilst they travelled, Cass spotted his own markings that he had left on his journey, realizing they were heading towards the large tree where he had fought off the spider ambush. On arriving at the giant tree, Phaedra beckoned Cass to follow her. "This tree marks the middle of the forest. There are subtle markings that can point you in the right direction, depending on your destination, that is." Phaedra showed Cass each symbol one by one. The symbols were cut into the bark of the surrounding trees. They were elegant and flowing and had been made with extreme care to blend in with the trees they were carved upon. She showed Cass the symbol for the elven homeland of Ashawen, Tyrantus, the land of the dwarves, and the Reducer's Wastes. They rested briefly before heading in the direction of Ashawen. "Are you sure you weren't an adventurer where you came from?" asked Phaedra. "Not many would survive a bone spider encounter with just a rock to hand," she added. "Oh, far from it. I worked in a retail store." Seeing Phaedra's incredulous look, Cass continued. "It's a shop or a market, so nothing exciting. Tossing out the occasional drunk was the height of adventure for me." Cass sighed. "I didn't have many friends because I worked all the time, so I'd usually just go and spend my time alone at home." "That's sad," Caleb called back. He had been walking ahead, but obviously not out of earshot. "Caleb," exclaimed Phaedra. "It may be sad, but you don't have to say it." "It's fine," said Cass. "You're not the first to say that, but I feel like that might change." With a grin, Cass looked ahead. The grin died on his face when a notification window materialized in his view. New quest, survive. Objective, survive troll attack 0 of 1. Bonus objective, kill troll. Reward, 10 silver coins, 1 troll hide, 5 health potions, 5 mana potions. Bonus rewards, belt of troll regeneration. "Oh fuck," breathed Cass. Chapter 12, Engulfing Flame. Mentally closing the window, Cass wheeled in all directions. "We're not alone," shouted Cass. Phaedra and Caleb had their bows in hand and arrows knocked in seconds. With Caleb having closed the short distance between them, he now stood back to back with Phaedra as they watched as many directions at once as they could. Cass summoned his dagger into his hand and held it in a shaky grip. The forest went deathly quiet, Cass's own breathing sounding far too loud for his ears. "I don't see anything," breathed Caleb angrily. "This better not be a trick, Cassidy." "It's not a—" Cass was cut off by a bellow as a large creature burst from behind a tree and raced towards the group. The troll surged forward, its claws extended. Cass tried to move, but he found his legs wouldn't answer him. The fear Cass had been pushing down from the onset of this nightmare began to be too much. His hands shook and his mouth went dry as he stared. The troll was at least 7 feet tall. Its skin was a dirty green and its muscles rippled as it moved. The troll's jaw, on seeing the elven pair, cracked and began to extend like a snake, its maw lined with rows of serrated teeth. Phaedra and Caleb both let loose, knocking their bows and firing with incredible speed. By the time the troll had reached them, it had already been pierced multiple times. The pair dodged out of the way as the troll slammed its fists into the ground, the force of the blow throwing up dirt and stones. Cass watched as the arrows fell from the troll's body, its wounds healing rapidly. Turning, the troll eyed up Cass. Considering him to be the easier meal, the troll stalked towards him. Trembling, Cass held his dagger in front of him in a weak defensive posture. Picking up speed, the troll barreled towards Cass. At the last second, Caleb tackled Cass out of the way whilst Phaedra renewed her assault. Brandishing her swords, Phaedra met the troll head-on, dancing under its strikes and lashing out with her own, leaving the troll with multiple slashes that began to close as soon as they were opened. Caleb, after saving Cass, was already firing arrow after arrow at the beast. Raising her hand, Phaedra spoke an incantation and a strong gust of wind cascaded around her, pushing back the troll. "We need fire!" roared Phaedra over the windy tumult. Caleb began to quickly rummage through his pack, producing cloth, oil, and a flint. He then began to wrap his arrows in the cloth and soak them in oil. "You're not going to make it," Cass said to himself, looking at Caleb preparing the fire arrows. The troll was gaining ground on Phaedra. Cass rose on shaky legs. "Stay down, Cassidy, it's too powerful," roared Caleb. Ignoring him, Cass summoned a mote of fire that flickered before manifesting properly. Cass roared as he hurled it at the troll. The fire burst over its back and clung to the troll's skin, searing flesh. The troll screeched, its arms flailing from the pain. One of the troll's flailing arms hit Phaedra in the face, knocking her down. Cass watched as Phaedra hit the ground hard, bouncing and rolling onto one side, then laying still. The troll ignored Phaedra and sprinted straight for Cass. Cass raised both hands. With a primal roar and the burning of over half his mana pool, he sent forth a torrent of flame. The flames washed over the troll, engulfing it in its entirety. Cass could feel his hands burning and see them blacken. He knew he should stop, but he couldn't, not until he was sure there would be nothing left. His health had started to slowly tick down, and it was steadily draining quicker. Cass heard something faintly, like a whisper spoken in the wind. He turned his head to see Caleb, mouthing the words for him to stop. "Just a little more," thought Cass. A few seconds later, his interface popped into his vision. Quest complete. Survive. Bonus objective complete. Kill troll. Reward: 10 silver coins, 1 troll hide, 5 health potions, 5 mana potions. Bonus reward: belt of troll regeneration. Level up: mana restored, health restored, attribute points +3. Cass dismissed the window as both he and Caleb ran to Phaedra's side. Her breathing was shallow and the blow she received had made a nasty gash on her forehead. Cass pulled one of the health potions he had received and held it out to Caleb. "What is it?" asked Caleb, who was eyeing Cass warily. "It's a healing potion. I'll lift her head, you tip the potion in." Raising Phaedra's head, Cass held her steady as Caleb uncorked the small vial and tipped the contents into Phaedra's mouth. Phaedra choked on the first bit of the liquid but managed the rest of the vial. Caleb and Cass both watched in amazement as her head wound closed and colour returned to her face. Phaedra slowly opened her eyes and sat up. Resting a hand on her shoulder, "How do you feel?" asked the obviously concerned Caleb. "I feel fine. I feel great actually," said Phaedra, who began examining the spot where the troll had struck. Caleb sat back with relief and looked at Cass. "I think there's more to you than just being handy with a rock," said Caleb. Chapter 13. Wind and Flame. The next part of the group's journey consisted of even more questions to Cass's dismay. He knew he had gone overboard. He couldn't even say he let his anger get the better of him. He had imagined himself alone again, and that had scared him deeply and prompted the outburst. Cass had looted what was left of the troll's corpse, acquiring another troll hide, 10 more silver coins, and a generous restock of both mana and health potions. Received: 1 troll hide, 10 silver coins, 3 mana potions, 3 health potions. They set off once more, Caleb walking behind this time and keeping a close eye on Cass. "Your fire magic seems to be quite strong," Phaedra said as she joined in step with Cass. "Thanks," Cass said. "You can control the wind?" he continued. "Air magic and a small bit of earth magic is all I can manage," said Phaedra. "I try to depend on it as little as possible. Magic can be extremely helpful, but it has its drawbacks, as you well may know." Cass looked down at his hands. They had been seared black before his level up had restored them. "I'm beginning to see that," said Cass. "People either have an affinity for magic or they don't, and when they do, they can use 2 of the 6 types of magic. What's your other affinity?" Cass held out his hand, palm up. Within seconds, a mote of fire blazed warmly. "Just fire so far. I'm not even sure what I'd pick next given the option," said Cass. "You're either born with the affinity or not. Being that you're not from this world, you might only have access to one affinity," said Phaedra. "Very, very rarely a person is born with an affinity for all the magics. The only one known of now who can use all the magic types is Calo Fenris," she continued. "The King of Malagos?" asked Cass. "The very same, and it's why the nations are cautious of any wayward humans traveling outside Malagos," replied Phaedra. "He is a master of all the magical arts. It's also a testament to his strength that his life affinity magic has kept him alive and youthful for centuries. No one knows how old he truly is," said Phaedra. "Why don't the other nations band together and put a stop to Fenris if he's that bad?" asked Cass. "The other nations are in turmoil. Rumors say that Fenris has his machinations already implanted in the Dwarven and Elven councils, leading them to inaction and petty rivalries, leaving Fenris to slowly strangle the continent," said Caleb, joining the conversation for the first time. "Tyrantus has closed their borders, leaving the dwarves to hide in their holes, stoking the flames of suspicion of all others. Our nation sends out adventurers like ourselves to gather information and report back if they can. Fewer have been returning more and more," said Caleb. "We've lost more than a few friends as of late," said Phaedra, her head slightly bowed. "The village is just ahead. We should stop before we go in," said Caleb, stopping and rummaging through his pack. He produced a cloak, similar to the cloaks that Phaedra and Caleb wore, but with an added hood. "Put this on," said Caleb as he tossed the garment to Cass. "This is an elven village, so keep that hood up. If any villagers see that you're human, you won't be so welcome. Keep your head down and let us do the talking," warned Caleb. Cass donned the cloak and lifted the hood, obscuring his face. Cass, Caleb, and Phaedra broke through the tree line and into the village. Chapter 14. Toyne Village. Cass walked behind Phaedra and Caleb, keeping his head down whilst taking in as much as he could. Villagers waved and greeted the elven pair, but gave Cass a wide berth. The buildings of the village were made of stone with thatch roofs. Cass counted around 14 houses of similar size and make. At the end of the row of houses, a larger building loomed above the rest. They made their way towards the larger building. Now that they were closer, Cass saw a sign above the door that read, "The Riven Inn." Before heading through the doorway and into the inn, Caleb reminded Cass once more to stay quiet. Once through the door, the smell of freshly cooked meats and vegetables hit Cass like a train. His mouth immediately watered, and only then did he realize how hungry he actually was. The inn's main room was warm and cozy, tables dotted the floor with many of them occupied, their occupants stopping their revelry to gaze at the newcomers. Once at the bar counter, Caleb ordered a room for 3 for the night, food and drink, after which the innkeeper beckoned towards a table at the back of the inn, away from overactive ears and prying eyes at Caleb's request. Keeping his hood up, Cass made his way to the table and sat down, followed quickly by Phaedra and Caleb. Having acquired their drinks at the bar counter, they hadn't made it a quarter of the way through their drinks before the innkeeper's wife delivered their meals. Large bowls of steaming stew, loaves of bread and a stick of butter were presented to the group. Having met Phaedra and Caleb already, the pleasant female elf introduced herself to Cass. "Evening, dear. My name's Mary. If you need anything, just let me or my husband know," said Mary, smiling politely. Cass began to reply to Mary, but was interrupted by Phaedra. This, Mary, is Cassidy, a cousin of Caleb's. He'll be passing through with us. An adventurer's life is a busy one. Enjoy your meals, said Mary before turning and walking away. My cousin? Asked Caleb with one raised brow. He looks nothing like me, he added. He is right here, Cass said around a mouthful of stew, eyeing Caleb from the rim of his bowl. After finishing his bowl of stew, Cass promptly asked if he could get another. Frowning, Caleb left the table to order another bowl. He doesn't like me very much, does he? Asked Cass once Caleb was out of earshot. Caleb is a bit of a warrior and a bit of a control freak, so this whole situation has gotten away from him, so don't take it personally, replied Phaedra with a smile. I'll keep that in mind, replied Cass, mirroring Phaedra's smile. After Cass had finished one more bowl of stew and a few pints of ale, the group retired to their room for the evening. The room was on the second floor of the inn and looked out over the main square. A single bed was against one wall with another just opposite. Each bed had a nightstand beside it, and an oil lamp hung from a rafter, illuminating the room. Another door in the room led to a small closet-like space that held another bed. Cass happily took the smaller room. He'd gotten far into his cups before they retired for the night. Scrambling onto the bed, Cass hadn't made it halfway under the blankets before he was snoring softly. Phaedra looked in on him, smiled, and closed the door quietly, leaving Cass to rest. Chapter 15. Growth. Cass awoke to a pounding in his head. Groaning, he sat up and rubbed his face. There wasn't a window in the small room, so he woke in darkness. With a thought, a small flame kindled just over Cass's shoulder, lighting the room. Looking around, he saw the walls were bare except for one which held a mirror. Cass stood, and from the light of his flame checked himself over. His brown hair came down to his eyes, which were blue and bloodshot. He had always shaved for work, it being company policy. Now the dark shadow of a growing beard lined his lower jaw, cheeks, and upper lip. He had a sharp nose, but it was obvious looking at it that it had been broken in the past. His face was caked in dirt and grime. Cass had never considered himself big, but looking himself over, he thought he had put on a little muscle since he had checked last, and wondered about his attribute points and what effect they were having on his body. Breathing heavily, Cass sat down. With a hangover starting to kick in, he brought up his interface. Looking at his character tab, he had 3 points to apply to his stats. Cassidy Farrell, High Human, Level 4. Stats: Strength 10, Intelligence 11, Dexterity 10, Constitution 10, Perception 8. Thinking it over, Cass had always gone to a mage class when playing his favourite games. He felt the urge to increase his intelligence by all 3 points, but decided versatility would probably be best for now. After changing the numbers of his stats, he mentally hit apply and sat back looking over his decision. Stats: Strength 11, Intelligence 12, Dexterity 10, Constitution 11, Perception 8. Breathing out, Cass realized he was no longer hungover. Guessing it was negated by him increasing his constitution, he rose to his feet and opened the door to the main bedroom to find it empty. Cass walked over and looked out of the window. He saw stalls with elven folk hawking their wares, young elves running to and fro, a farmer with the largest cow Cass had ever seen passing through, and also he spied Phaedra and Caleb at what looked to be a clothes stand. Guessing that the pair were buying new clothes for himself as he looked down at his ragged t-shirt and old trousers, which now sported more holes than ever. Taking in his surroundings, he had hardly noticed the small desk and chair in one corner of the room when he had made his way to bed last night, but now Cass sat and went over his situation. He had told Caleb and Phaedra that he hadn't had many friends, but that wasn't necessarily true. He had friends, but he had slowly alienated himself from them. His friends had all been getting on with their lives, getting married and having children. Cass, however, was trapped in a routine he had been stuck in for years. He would finish work, laboriously make himself some dinner when he got home, and then find himself once again in front of his monitor, with tendrils of heavy smoke twisting and curling around him deep into the night, clambering into bed only as the sun rose. Cass wondered if anyone back home missed him. His parents had died when he was 25 in a car accident, and if he thought about it, that's around the same time he started to close himself off. Pausing, he thought of Freya. He had loved her once, but realised it was one-sided early on and never wanted to ruin their friendship. She'd be the first to notice his absence. They talked mostly through game chat, and when having not logged on in over a day or two, she might worry. Putting thoughts of home aside, Cass stood and walked to the window once more. He'd always wanted to be more than what he was, to be wanted, to be a hero, and to feel important. But he had always felt like an NPC in his own life. Now though, he had power and a chance to become what he always wanted. Smiling, he turned as Phaedra and Caleb came into the room. "Morning," said Cass, eyeing the bundle of clothes Caleb held in his arms. Caleb grunted and tossed the bundle of clothes at Cass, who caught them deftly. "Good morning. Are you hungry?" Phaedra asked with an answering smile. "I could eat," replied Cass whilst he moved into the side room to change. Cass summoned a small flame to light the room. The clothes the pair had brought for him were of similar make to their own, cotton, leather, and in colours of green and brown. Cass also noticed another hooded cape. He donned his new garments and walked out to Phaedra and Caleb. "See," Phaedra said, turning on Caleb. "I knew he'd be around your size. He might be a cousin after all," said Phaedra, hiding a laugh behind her hand. Receiving a glare from Caleb, Phaedra backed towards the door, hands up in surrender. "I'll order us some food." With that, she bolted from the room, leaving Caleb and Cass looking at each other.